Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Strategy Game Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Shippey, and today I have one of my favorite people joining me, Julie Wilson, the president of Women Doing Well. Hey, Julie, how you doing?
Hey, Lauren, so good and so good to be with you.
I love our friendship. It's been such a gift to me over the years. Julie was in a mastermind of mine. I think that was started right before COVID, and it was all during COVID, right? So
Correct.
it really, I think it got us through. I don't know. It was a really crazy time.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. It bonded us forever too. I'll always
Yes.
remember who I was with during those early days of COVID.
Yep, it was crazy. Thank God for Zoom. I mean, it saved us all. It gave us some sanity. So Julie, tell us a little bit about the organization Women Doing Well and just, your role as president there right now.
Sure. Well, many people don't know that with the Great Wealth Transfer, women are going to be stewarding, controlling, making the decisions for spending and giving in for 70% of the wealth in the
Wow.
United States. It's a huge number. So our organization is uniquely equipped with a research study that we did. It's the largest in the world on women and giving, on how to come alongside women and activate their generosity. And the research showed that there were three key elements to her generosity coming alive: knowing her purpose, knowing her passion, and having a plan. And that's what we do. We take women through a transformational pathway, equipping her with those things, and then we hand her off to different service providers and organizations that can help her activate that generosity.
I love that. It really helps give women a space to process, and through just going through some of the process with you all, what's been so cool about it is that it really looks at your heart and where your heart is and what's happening in you too, and who you are, like your identity, your individual identity. And we talk a lot about this at Storywork. And then it kind of like it marries all those things with what you love to do and your gifts, and it helps you kind of muddle through or reason through, who you are, why you're here, and then where you want to go, and like how you want to direct your time and talent and treasure. I know, you guys reference that. And so it's just been such a gift. And I just finished writing the manuscript, and I was doing the
Mhm.
acknowledgments, and I was telling Julie before the start of the show that I'm so grateful to the Women Doing Well community for them having me at one of their retreats and being able to talk through the weeds in the way. So you guys will see that on the podcast too, because we're taking one weed in the way at a time, like stubbornness, bitterness, all those fun things, and talking through them and how to release those. And so Women Doing Well was just a really pivotal part of that story. So getting to your story, tell us, how did you get here? Because it's always a winding road. It's usually not a linear journey. So what has your journey looked like so far?
Well, if I go all the way back to the beginning, I grew up in Connecticut, in New England, in a small town, and my dad and mom were pretty amazing. My dad was in a coat and tie every morning, off to his insurance job to make money to pay for us girls. And my mom, while she was second in her class in physical therapy, chose to stay home with us. There was some intention to that. My dad was a man of the 70s, and he at some point said verbally, no wife of mine is going to work. Because
Oh,
back then,
yeah.
if a wife had to work, it meant something about the man's success. I don't think it's still that way, but that was the day. And so these were some of the messages I got. So
Yeah.
at 40, my dad decided to start a company. And so he moved us from Connecticut to Miami, Florida. And that was a huge shift for us. And I got to watch a business almost not make it and then really make it big. And
Mhm.
that was thrilling. I didn't know in those early days how much leadership was being planted in my heart and really given me I told my dad at one point, I'd really love to run your company someday. I knew nothing about real estate. It was commercial real estate. I really thought it was kind of boring what he did, but I loved that he had to run something, and that whole idea of seeing something grow. So those early days weren't specific, but I definitely caught the bug for entrepreneurship. And then I went off to college, and I went to Boston University. I was pursuing a career in journalism. I graduated and really, had a desire to change the world through the media. I thought that was the best medium to make a difference in the world. And I moved there without a job. So on my way in my little Honda Civic, I had my Marlboro Lights, and I had two very distinct emotions from Boston to New York City. And one was really excited because I was moving to like the city where anything could happen. And
Yeah.
then obviously the next emotion was, what am I doing? I'm moving to the city where anything could happen. Like, this is crazy. And anyways, I moved to New York. My life took a pretty big shift when even though I had grown up going to church, I learned of a church called Redeemer Presbyterian in New York with Pastor Tim Keller. And that was a time where I was pretty lost. And so I went just to kind of get grounded, but really, really met Jesus and had a relationship with him which changed how I viewed New York City and this dream job at NBC that I had just gotten. And I will tell you that it also shaped my leadership because I decided to take a break from
Wow.
NBC and go into full-time vocational nonprofit work. So I've been in the nonprofit world leading for 30 years. And there's lots more to that, but I'll pause because that was a lot.
I love that. That's so good. So you can see the twists and turns and the journey and the different locations and the different phases, of your life. And, I think I'm gonna reverse like the order of the questions a little bit here because, as part of our process, we usually go through the triumphs and the hardships, and you look back at the different phases in your life, like all the way through elementary school, middle, high school, college, after college, that whole journey. And as you're thinking through those things, what would some of the themes be in terms of just challenges that you've been through and triumphs? You don't have to necessarily share like the exact examples, but just themes,
Mhm.
that are highlighted to you.
I would say some of the themes for me have been that I have this deep desire to make an impact, and yet my view of myself over all these different seasons have been, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Who would ever take you seriously? There's a voice that I don't know where it comes from. My dad used to say, you can do anything you want to do.
Hmm.
Like you've got everything at your fingertips. Like, what do you want to do? Go do it. So there was never a sense that I didn't have. So I don't know where it came from, but there was a very strong voice like, sit back down.
Ooh.
Who do you think you are? What are
Silence.
you doing? And so some of the challenge honestly has been myself
Yeah.
and trying to really name and figure out what is really overestimating my ability and what is really me limiting myself. And that I guess that just it really goes way back. Some of it was, I already hinted at it, the messaging I got in the 70s from
Yeah.
a family that was not really
Yeah.
uh, there weren't super conservative socially. So there wasn't but my dad did say as I went off to Boston University, I'm going to pay for this, but don't become a feminist. What does that mean? I didn't even know what a feminist was. And
Right.
going to Boston University, a very liberal, well-respected institution, and taking a class on movements.
Mm-hmm.
And we studied the women's movement, the men's movement, the environmental movement. But what I got so captured by was this idea that when enough people believe in something, you can change it for good. You can literally change history. And I was like, I want to do that. And
Yeah.
so a little bit later, when my faith journey became more important, I remember I was reading in scripture about kind of the early part of the church, and it dawned on me like, this is a movement, it's still happening 2000 years later. Like, holy smokes, like I think this is what I'm supposed to be part of, is really fueling this. But again, some of the messages that I got in those spiritual environments, those faith environments, was this is what women do, this is what men do, stay in your lane.
Goals,
Did
right.
anyone ever really say that to me?
Mm.
Probably not, but it was said in 1,000 ways. And I'm a good girl. So I'm like, stay in your lane, be
Right.
small, be
Yeah.
supportive, play the support role, be the
Yeah.
second, look for a strong leader. And I dated some wonderful men, but oftentimes I just felt like I was way too much. And again, so that's that
So
theme
again,
of
that like silencing,
I'm
like be
way
quiet,
too much, be
take
quiet.
yourself less.
Yeah. And I will say it took many years, and a lot of counseling, but some things did surface that we won't go into today, but made a lot of sense of why I had some of those narratives.
Yes.
And and yet the victim mentality doesn't work in leadership. You got to own your own stuff. You got to own other people's stuff sometimes on behalf of their development. You got to sort of just suck it up and like take it.
Yes.
And it took me a long time to be willing to go there. And another theme I would say is what I would call faux leadership.
Okay.
This is unique to women. I talk to many women, and there's sometimes this sense that you're leading, but really, when you look at what leadership is, it's people and resources. And so
Mhm.
if you're not managing people and money,
Yeah.
budgets, can we really say that there's influence leadership? You're definitely having an impact. It's not like leaders are the only people that lead, but true leadership, the way it's designed, is you have to have agency to get stuff done
Yeah.
and be the one on the hook if it doesn't work.
Mm.
And so I can tell you that I just didn't have those opportunities. I always had somebody that was above me responsible.
Yep.
And uh, I didn't know that for many years. It's only been in this role running this nonprofit that I'm actually on the hook, and it is my fault if stuff goes wrong. And while it's terrifying, it's so life-giving to me because of those narratives that I described, like, who do you think you are? I go, well, I know who I am, and I am not enough. And yet God is. If
Yeah.
he's made me a leader, I can lead. I
Right.
just have to keep showing up every day. And
That's
sometimes that's all I can do is
yeah.
show up.
That's so good. Thank you for sharing all that. It's so good. And I love what you're saying about, through lots of counseling and, processing and all of us, right? Counseling is the name of the game. But I think through the different wounds in our lives and the different moments in each part of our story, when we're able to pull those out and look at them and maybe turn the kaleidoscope a bit to see it from a different view and
Mhm.
maybe, get rid of that victim mentality and own what we can in it and release what we can in it, then we're able to move forward and use it productively. It actually can become a productive part of our story. And that's what I see you doing and what I've seen you do over and over again. And so I really admire that in you as a leader. It's just been an inspiration to me personally. So thank you for sharing that. As you look back, what has been the most important trait that has carried you through all of these years of leading in different ways?
There's kind of a general one, which is just being resilient and not giving up, even through some really hard times. But I would say for sure, the most important quality is generosity,
Mm.
because there's two different ways to view the world. You can view it through a scarcity lens. There's not enough. There can only be one woman at the table. Money's not enough. Like there's all these places where scarcity can rear its head. But as I have been growing in my understanding of God's generosity in every way towards us, even just the amount of trees there are in the world, or the fact that we have sunlight every day, and there's so much generosity, right? So
Yeah.
as I view the world through a generosity lens, it makes me want to be a better leader because I want to leave scarcity behind. I always want to be based in reality, but as a more scarce person in my temperament, it's been game changing for my leadership to actually just walk by faith and believe there is enough, that I'm enough. I'll have enough when I get there. And I just need to not let those limiting beliefs stop me from the things that are right before me. And that's the only difference between me and another leader, let's say,
Mm.
and me and myself 15 years ago, is that I'm changing the lens with which I view myself and the world and others. There's just more than enough. I can collaborate. I can be generous. I can think outside the box. All of that comes from this generosity lens.
Wow, that's so good. So it's like really to do that, I guess you're ridding yourself of fears that pop up. I always think of the whack-a-mole game, like you go forward in this generous mindset. And I love the way you even presented it about like there's more like the trees, like everything that you can see. What are the different ways that you can be generous? We think of money, but it's not just about money. There are so many different ways that we can be generous or have a generous lens. but we've got a whack-a-mole fear or insecurity or those weeds in the way that pop up at the same time. So I guess that's where your other trait of just resilience and working through hard things would come in, like this
Mhm.
beautiful balance of being resilient and committed and just showing up and standing there and then adjusting that lens to generosity.
Mhm. Yeah, and to believe that the ideas that are in my mind, a friend of mine calls it the screen of your imagination. So as a visionary leader, sometimes I'll just get these pictures and I'm thinking, what is that? What do I do with that? And what I'm learning to do is just hold space for it. Just say, don't be afraid of it. It might be 10 years from now that that thing's going to happen. I don't have to tell my team about it. I could just write it in my journal and
Yep.
say, thank you, God, for giving me that picture. I don't know what it all means yet. Whereas before I would sort of berate myself, who do you think you are? And that's the most ridiculous. Like there would be this whole negative. Now I'm like, huh, God's big. And you
Yeah.
know what? If I
Fair.
can think it, it can happen. Right? Like I'm from the Jetsons age. That's how old I am. I used to watch that show. I mean,
Jetsons.
the
Love it.
Jetsons is actually, somebody imagined that years ago when that was unimaginable. We
Sure.
may have flying cars in my lifetime. I mean, we already have them, but we might actually be driving or
Yeah.
flying them, right? And so I just find it to be amazing. If our imagination can dream it, I believe it's because God can do it.
Hmm.
Not in our own power can we do it, but I think with God's grace, and that's for believers and non-believers, like right,
Yeah.
grace is everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, so I just think that as a leader, it really helps to just allow yourself to um, hold tension for the things that don't make any sense this year, but might in 10.
That's so good. That's
Yeah.
really good. In that process right now, the place, and we were talking a little bit about it, of going to the dreaming room. That's what I call it. Just spending time in the dreaming room and knowing that there's reality and that some of these things may not happen for years, but if you can hold space for it, when the time comes, you'll know. So it's really cool.
I'm also learning there are some leaders that you work with, and what by leaders, I mean there are people on your team who are leading elements of your organization. And I've just gotten really respectful that there are people on the team doing absolutely critical work, but they don't have any capacity for where I live most of my days as a visionary. And so really just making sure you create places like my relationship with you is a place where I can like go, I just had this idea and I got to tell somebody,
Yeah.
because you will just hold space for me and let that just be true. Whereas somebody else would just kind of give me a look that in a past day, I'd be like, oh, who am I? I'm so ridiculous. Like,
Yes.
again, it's being emotionally aware enough to know that it's not other people's fault if they don't understand.
So true.
It's like, just let them be who they are. They're going to execute your plan and make it so that it's not a complete chaotic mess.
Yes.
And so that's just something I'm learning in the current moment I'm in as a leader. And it's been really helpful to just realize like, I'm the way I am, and that's what's needed for the organization, and other people are going to be in a different place. So this is really more, you know, for a unique group of leaders who are visionary leaders where they have to hold space for themselves in that way.
Yes, I've been thinking about similar, so I'm really glad you shared that because I think previously I would do the same thing. I would share with some and it wouldn't make sense, it wouldn't resonate. And then sometimes that's hard as a leader because then you can look at yourself and think like, I must be crazy or this is not. So you can start to doubt yourself. So I think it's that. Recently I heard a word, I wrote this down in my journal, but it was really a focus on don't look down because if you look down, you fall. So as if I had this vision of like being on a tightrope. So you can't
Mm.
look down, you have to just put one foot in front of the other, stay focused and walk straight ahead. And part of that, I think, it can look like a lot of things, but taking out distraction, the whack-a-mole, a fear, whatever comes up, showing up and standing, allowing time for dreaming and vision, but knowing where and when to share things, just all kinds of things. So what helps stay on the tightrope so that, we're staying focused and
Mhm.
or we need to be in our lanes. So
Mhm.
to wrap up here, Julie, and I've loved everything you've shared so far. What have you learned only through time over
Mhm.
the years that you would tell others earlier in their journey?
Mhm. Well, audience is uniquely women, although I don't think that this is a uniquely woman thing. Put a team around you, because as a leader, you need people to help you get where you're going. I don't think any of us can get there alone.
Yeah.
And having the right counselors at different seasons, coaches, our group together as part of Storywork was super pivotal when I was a young, just starting out leader and COVID hit. I think I wish I had not been ashamed to ask for help. Having a team means being willing as a leader to have need and to embrace it, because if you're going to do something big, you're not doing it alone. I hope everybody that listens is trying to do something so big they have to have other people and, more importantly, God, in order to accomplish it, because I think that the world needs big ideas, and it needs to see people showing up in fullness and generosity. So
So good.
don't avoid help. Ask for help, put teams around you, be proactive. That's what I would tell myself.
We love it. Thank you so much. Julie, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to link to Women Doing Well in the show notes, but
Oh.
just appreciate you so much.
Appreciate you. Thank you.